Some questions do not simply knock on the door of your mind. They arrive like a soft whisper in the stillness of midnight, pressing against the thin boundary of the known world. Do the dead still watch us from beyond the veil? It's a question so hauntingly personal and yet so cosmically vast that it transcends mere curiosity. It pulls at something ancient in the bones, something that aches for connection even after death has spoken its final word. And if you've ever felt the chill of being observed while alone, or dreamed of a departed loved one so vividly it seemed more memory than fantasy, then you've already brushed against the edges of this invisible question. Stay with me until the end of this video, for what you're about to hear will not only peel back the curtain between this life and the next, but it may just reshape how you walk through the living world. If you haven't yet, make sure to subscribe to this channel, because the hidden layers of reality are deeper than you've been told, and this journey has only just begun. We are born into a world that teaches us to measure reality by what we can touch, quantify, and dissect. We are told that the moment breath leaves the body, the story ends, curtains close, silence reigns. And yet, there is an undercurrent, a whisper that moves through the lives of those left behind, a feeling, an intuition, a sign, a shadow moving just outside the frame of the photograph, a scent in the air that carries memory like incense, a voice in the mind that is not yours, yet speaks as if it's always known you. To ask if the dead still watch us is to step out of the mechanical age and into the mythic terrain of consciousness. It is not a matter of superstition, but of attention, of tuning one's awareness to a subtler frequency where memory, love, and presence do not fade with the decay of flesh. If there is such a thing as a soul, if awareness is not merely a chemical flicker, but something woven into the greater fabric of existence, then what becomes of that soul once it sheds the body like a cocoon? We find ourselves standing between two great rivers, the river of the living, where time flows forward and form holds weight, and the river of the unseen, where the waters run beneath and beyond, silent and slow. Most live their days glancing only at the former, unaware of the shimmer of eyes that may still gaze from the banks of the latter. But some, those attuned by grief, wonder, or trauma, have seen signs. They've caught glimpses through the veil, a dream too vivid to dismiss, a message delivered through uncanny synchronicity, a warmth that fills the room just when a name is spoken aloud. The ancients knew these things, long before modern minds drew borders between what is real and what is imagination. Cultures across the world communed with the dead as naturally as they would with the wind or the stars. The Egyptians believed in the Ka, the double of the soul, that lingered to watch over the living. The Celts spoke of the thin places where the worlds touched. In the East, ancestors are not gone but present, integrated into the rhythm of everyday life through offerings, prayers, and remembrance. And the mystics of every tradition, from Sufis to shamans, speak of spirits walking alongside us, whispering reminders from the other shore. But the veil, the veil, is thin, yet sacred. It is not pierced by force, only by reverence. To gaze into the question of whether the dead watch the living is not to demand proof or debate doctrine, but to soften the eyes of the soul and look with the heart. It is to listen with the ears of intuition. It is to acknowledge that death may be a threshold, not a terminus. This isn't merely metaphysical musing, it is deeply human. It arises from the longing to know whether those we've lost are still near, whether our actions still echo in their presence, whether they rejoice in our victories or weep at our losses, whether they know we still speak their names, light their candles, visit their graves, and, perhaps most haunting of all, whether we too will one day watch from beyond as our children laugh, struggle, grow, and carry our stories forward in their bones. And so, this exploration begins not in theory, but in mystery. In that quiet ache we carry when we think of those we love who have crossed over. In that sudden chill, that unexplainable comfort, that tear falling without cause. Perhaps they do watch, perhaps not with eyes, but with presence. Not with judgment, but with love unbound from form. Perhaps the veil is not a wall, but a mist, and through it, what is essential remains connected. Let us journey together, beyond superstition, beyond skepticism, into that liminal space between presence and absence. The place where memory becomes more than memory, where time folds, where silence speaks. To ask whether the dead watch us is not merely a question about the afterlife, it is a question about presence, continuity, and the unseen architecture of reality. It challenges the foundation of how we define being alive. It forces us to look at the deeper currents beneath the visible world and ask ourselves, is there such a thing as separation, or only transformation? And if consciousness does not end with death, where does it go? More importantly, how does it remain? Let us begin with the thread of consciousness, the eternal spark. Modern science seeks to reduce it to neurons, electricity, and chemical reaction. But consciousness itself laughs at containment. It is the one thing we know most intimately and yet cannot define. We are conscious of our breath, our thoughts, our surroundings, but we are also conscious of dreams, of symbols, of ancestors. In every culture, there lies an ancient recognition that consciousness is not born of the brain. It simply moves through it, like light through stained glass. The body is a lens, but the light itself comes from elsewhere. So when death occurs, the body, our vessel, returns to the soil. But what of that light, that awareness, that selfhood that dreamt, loved, feared, and remembered? If it is not bound by the flesh, why should it perish with it? If consciousness is fundamental, as many quantum thinkers now propose, then death is less a deletion and more a migration, a passage through dimensions. And this is where the veil appears. The veil is not a place, it is a perception. It is the shimmering film between what the senses detect and what the soul intuits. Most people live as though this veil is impermeable, but in truth, it is thin, fragile, permeable by emotion, by intention, by grief, and, most of all, by love. When people say, "I felt her presence," or "he came to me in a dream," they are not making metaphysical statements. They are describing a felt truth, a soul-to-soul contact. So the first theme is this: consciousness continues, and because it continues, so too does connection. The dead do not vanish into nothingness. They move into a realm where time bends, where intention becomes structure, and where love becomes the language. The second theme is interdimensional awareness. From this perspective, those who have died are not gone. They are simply living in a spectrum of reality that the living cannot always access. They are as present as radio waves in the room around you. You do not hear them until you tune the dial. And grief, ironically, is one of the few things that changes our frequency. Grief strips away the ordinary. It stretches the soul wide open. In that vulnerability, the dead come close, not to haunt, but to remind. But why would they watch? What is the purpose? Is it mere sentiment, or is there something more? This brings us to the third theme: unfinished stories. The dead often carry with them karmic threads, soul contracts, and spiritual bonds that do not sever at the point of death. Parents may continue to protect their children. Lovers may return to comfort. Even those who left this world in pain may hover, not to harm, but to understand, to witness, to release what was once tangled. And it goes further. Some suggest that the dead serve as guides, subtle influences on our path, helping us course correct without force, through nudges, dreams, inner voices. Not every deceased soul watches, but those who do are drawn by ties of love, lessons left incomplete, or duties of the heart. Their watching is not the surveillance of some cold celestial observer. It is intimate, reverent, and sometimes aching. Yet we must not romanticize this too simply. There are also themes of non-interference and energetic balance. The dead do not always intervene, even when we suffer. There are laws, spiritual laws, that govern how and when contact occurs. Like looking through a one-way mirror, they may see, but cannot always speak. Or perhaps they whisper, but the living are too deafened by the noise of modern life to hear. And here we arrive at one of the more haunting realizations. We may be the ones with the veil over our eyes. The dead may not be watching us from some distant perch. They may be standing right beside us, waiting for us to become still enough to notice. From a metaphysical lens, time is not linear but layered. The past is not gone, the future not yet. It is all folded within the now. And so, if the dead still watch, it is not through eyes like ours, but through awareness that transcends sequence. They may see not just who we are, but what we are becoming, not just what we say, but what we mean. Their vision is not visual, it is vibrational. Ultimately, the question, do they watch, becomes a reflection of ourselves. Are we watchable? Do we live as though our ancestors are still bearing witness? Do we honor the weight of their gaze? Or do we walk blindly, as if life is isolated and self-contained? This is not about fear, it is about reverence. To believe the dead are watching is not to believe we are being judged. It is to believe we are still known, still felt, still loved, and perhaps even guided. This is the foundation upon which our next exploration rests. Consciousness beyond form, presence beyond time, connection beyond death. If these pillars hold truth, then the veil is not a wall, it is a membrane. And just beyond it, eyes may still gleam with recognition. If philosophy speaks in questions, then symbols speak in riddles, mysteries folded into metaphor, waiting to be opened like ancient scrolls. To answer whether the dead still watch us is not just to gaze through telescopes of reason, but to descend into the mythic caves of the human psyche, where story and spirit coalesce. There, truths are encoded not in data, but in dreams, visions, and archetypes. In this place, language softens into imagery, and the soul begins to understand what the intellect cannot hold. Picture a woman standing in a forest at dusk. The trees rise around her like cathedral pillars. She walks slowly, eyes drawn to the golden light filtering through the canopy. But then she stops. She feels something. A hush falls. The wind stirs not just the leaves, but something within her chest. She feels watched, not in fear, but with presence, as if someone is remembering her, even now, across the threshold of time. Her grandmother, perhaps, gone for 10 years, but never truly distant. The scent of lavender rises for no reason. A memory returns, the old woman humming, tending herbs in her garden. The girl begins to weep, not in sorrow, but in recognition. Something in her knows, the dead are not asleep. They are near. They witness us in ways the living cannot. This story is no rare phenomenon. It is encoded in the human experience across ages. In mythology, we find Orpheus descending into the underworld not to escape death, but to retrieve his beloved. In Egyptian lore, the Eye of Horus never sleeps, watching from beyond life to ensure harmony is maintained. In the East, the Bardo, Tibetan Buddhism's intermediate realm, describes the dead as both transitioning and observing, lingering between realities, touching the world they've left as they prepare for what comes next. But these are not mere stories. They are metaphors for a deeper metaphysical current. The dead do not disappear. They migrate into the symbolic. When we dream of them, speak their names, or follow the silent impulses they once ignited in us, we enter into a communion that cannot be measured but is profoundly felt. Let us look deeper into another image, the mirror. In ancient folklore, mirrors were covered when someone died, not for superstition alone, but because they were seen as portals, gateways through which spirits could linger. The mirror became a threshold, and still today, the mirror is a place where many feel the presence of something other. When standing alone, have you ever caught a flicker of movement not your own, a shimmer that vanishes too quickly to be explained? Perhaps it is not just our reflection staring back. Perhaps memory leaves an echo. Perhaps love leaves an imprint. Now consider the flame, a candle lit for the dead, a vigil, a memory with fire. There is something primal in this ritual. The flickering flame becomes the stand-in for a soul, dancing, luminous, delicate, and alive in a realm just beyond ours. We light it not only to remember, but to invite. To say, I still see you. Do you still see me? And in that moment, the space between the worlds tightens. Many speak of lights dimming, candles flaring, electric pulses in rooms where such rituals are held. Could this be coincidence? Or is the symbolic language of energy and intention far more potent than we dare admit? Then there is the door, a symbol almost universally tied to death and beyond. The final door, the crossing. And yet, what if that door is not closed from the other side? What if the dead leave it ajar, peeking through, watching the ripples we continue to make in their absence? Some believe we walk through that door every night in our dreams, and that there, while the body sleeps, the soul communes with those who have gone before. This would explain the clarity of certain dreams, vivid, loving, healing. Not dreams, but visits. Many have woken with tears, convinced they spoke to someone they've lost. Often, the dead do not speak in those dreams. They simply watch, hold us, smile, and that is enough. That is everything. The final symbol is the thread, invisible but unbreakable. It is the tie between souls across lifetimes. The red string in Eastern mythology, the golden thread in Greek thought, the silver cord in mystical texts. It binds not only lovers and kin, but mentor and student, parent and child, friend and stranger. And when one dies, the thread does not sever, it tightens. It becomes a line of communication, subtle but real. The sensation of being watched, guided, loved, though the source cannot be seen. Through these symbols, forest, mirror, flame, door, thread, we do not just tell stories, we decode truths. The dead, it seems, do not simply vanish into abstract nothingness. They remain interwoven into the mythic fabric of our daily lives. Their watching is not voyeuristic or passive. It is participatory, energetic, and often symbolic. They speak through synchronicity, through the hawk flying overhead, through the song that comes on at the right moment, through the inexplicable feeling that someone is beside you when no one else is. The veil, then, is not just a boundary between life and death. It is the canvas upon which spirit paints its presence in metaphor. And the more we learn to read these metaphors, the more we realize we are never alone. Not really. We are witnessed by those who came before, and perhaps even by the selves we have yet to become. It is one thing to dwell in mysticism, to swim in the symbolic rivers and ancient metaphors that hint at unseen worlds. But what happens when you step back into your shoes, close the dream journal, walk into the fluorescent light of the modern world. What does it mean practically, here and now, to believe, or even just to entertain the possibility, that the dead still watch us from beyond the veil? To carry this belief is not to live in fantasy. On the contrary, it can root us more deeply into the reality of meaning. In a world increasingly driven by algorithms, surface-level distractions, and the noise of endless consumption, the idea that we are watched, not by surveillance cameras or social media feeds, but by the quiet awareness of those who have passed, instills a deeper sense of accountability. Not accountability out of fear or judgment, but out of reverence. It makes every small act feel sacred. When you speak with compassion, you are not simply being kind for kindness' sake. You are honoring the invisible presence of those who taught you love, even if they are no longer here to say your name aloud. The grieving mother who leaves a plate for her son at dinner years after his passing. The soldier who hears his father's voice urging him forward in moments of despair. The young woman who lights a candle every morning for a grandmother she barely knew. These are not empty rituals. They are soul-anchoring acts that bridge realms. And when we live as if the veil is thin, the mundane begins to shimmer. The silence is no longer empty. The wind carries messages. The world becomes alive again, with presence layered upon presence. We begin to treat our decisions not only as personal, but relational. Relational with the past, with the unseen, with the continuum of spirit that flows through bloodline and memory. You don't lie as easily when you imagine your grandfather's spirit in the room. You don't abandon your purpose as readily when you feel the gentle nudge of a mother who crossed over but still believes in you. Even in solitude, you are surrounded. This awareness can serve as both comfort and compass. And yet, there is another side to this awareness, one that asks for discernment. For just as love can linger, so too can unprocessed pain. The presence of the dead is not always felt as a warm embrace. Sometimes it is a heaviness, a recurring dream, a shadow that haunts without words. In these cases, the veil's thinning invites not only remembrance, but healing. You may be carrying someone else's story, someone who died before they could forgive, finish, or free themselves. And their watching is not meant to trap you, but to ask you to complete the cycle, to give voice to the unspoken, to release what remains bound. This is where ancestral work becomes more than a trend. It becomes a spiritual responsibility. When we clean graves, recite prayers, light candles, or simply speak names aloud, we are engaging in a healing process that is not one-directional. It flows both ways. We offer peace to them, and they offer strength to us. In many traditions, healing your lineage is considered one of the highest acts of service, precisely because the dead are not gone. They are still entangled in our energetic reality, watching, guiding, sometimes even needing us to grow so that they too may evolve. This is not metaphysics for the elite or the mystically inclined. This is real-world transformation. Consider how grief therapy, trauma healing, and spiritual psychology now intersect. The sensation of being watched by a deceased loved one often emerges in therapy, not as pathology, but as comfort. It becomes a point of connection that allows a client to reframe their pain. Instead of saying, "I'll never see them again," they begin to say, "I feel them watching over me." This shift alone can dissolve despair. Children, too, often speak of the dead more openly. A child will say, "Grandpa visited me last night," without hesitation. Their veil is thinner, their perception not yet clouded by the hardened categories of logic. If we could retain even a fraction of that openness into adulthood, our relationships with death and with life would be transformed. It also affects how we approach death itself. To believe that we will one day become part of that great watching, that we ourselves may linger not in torment, but in love, changes how we live now. It softens the fear. It replaces dread with duty. To live in a way that would make our watching presence a blessing, not a burden, to those we leave behind. We begin to think not just in terms of legacy, but of presence. Who will feel us? What unfinished business will remain? What energy will we carry with us beyond the veil? Daily choices begin to echo. You become more intentional with your energy. You create altars, not just with objects, but with actions. A kind gesture becomes an offering. A handwritten letter becomes a ritual. Silence becomes a sanctuary in which you hear the whispers from beyond. And in this way, spiritual awareness is no longer a side project. It becomes life itself. Ultimately, to believe that the dead still watch us is not to deny science, nor to replace reason with fantasy. It is to stretch perception, to consider that reality is more layered than it seems, that consciousness extends, that death is not absence but metamorphosis, and that we, in the living world, are never quite as alone as we think. In the end, we return not to answers, but to awareness. All along this journey, from mystical whispers to practical integration, we've walked beside a question that is far older than language itself. Do the dead still watch us? And if so, what does that make of us, the living? The truth is, we are not singular beings stumbling blindly across a random planet. We are threads in a tapestry woven across dimensions. Our lives are not isolated sparks. They are part of a fire that stretches across generations, across lives, across veils. And if the dead do indeed still watch us, they do so not as spectators, but as participants in an ongoing unfolding of meaning, growth, and soul evolution. Think of yourself as a flame in a long line of flames, each one passed gently from hand to hand across time. You did not create the fire, you inherited it, and someday you will pass it on. But in this in-between, this now, you are seen. The flicker of your life is not hidden in the darkness. It is witnessed by those who once burned just as you do, and who now stand in the invisible fields of light beyond our understanding. You are not alone in your grief, not alone in your joy, not alone in your silence or confusion, in moments of clarity or despair, of falling apart or rising into yourself. You are watched not with judgment, but with a timeless, aching love. Perhaps even a love that has waited lifetimes to return to your side. Some may call this memory or imagination. Others may call it spirit, soul, ancestor, guide. But beneath the names is the same sacred pulse, presence that remains, watching not to control, but to witness, to anchor, to remind. There is an ancient story, told not with words, but with feeling, that every soul makes a vow before entering this world. A vow not just to grow, but to remember. And what if the watching eyes of the dead are part of that vow? A gentle pressure from beyond the veil to help us recall who we truly are when the noise of the world tries to make us forget. To those who have lost someone, their absence is real, but so is their presence. Speak their names, honor them, listen, not with your ears, but with your soul. Pay attention to the dreams, to the symbols, to the coincidences that defy explanation. These are not illusions. They are echoes of something real, a love that did not die, even if the body did. To those who live in fear of death, take comfort. You will not vanish. You will become the witness. You will become the whisper. You will join the silent circle of presence, standing behind the living with a love that does not age. And to those who feel called to walk between the worlds, artists, dreamers, mystics, healers, your sensitivity is not a flaw. It is a gift. It is how the veil thins. It is how the unseen becomes known. Do not run from it. Lean in. You are the bridge. So let this question live inside you, not to haunt you, but to guide you. Let it shape how you walk, how you speak, how you treat others. Live as though someone is watching, not to punish, but to preserve. Live as though love is still in the room, as though time bends in the presence of memory, as though your every choice becomes an offering, not just to the living, but to the invisible hearts that still beat beyond the veil. And when you sit in silence tonight, lights low, heart open, imagine them. Those you've lost. Picture their eyes. Feel their hands on your shoulders. Let the tears come if they must. For in that soft breaking, the veil becomes thin, and you may just hear them, not in words, but in stillness. I'm still here. I've never left. I see you. I always have. Now, take this knowing with you, into your day, into your life. Let it shape your choices. Let it steady your grief. Let it awaken the part of you that is eternal, because the dead are not gone. They are simply waiting, watching, loving, still.